Casey, there have been a lot of questions raised and submitted actually for this discussion, talking about hormones and antibiotics with animals. Do you use hormones or antibiotics or both?
Yeah, on the cattle and the hogs that we raise, we don't implant hormones, for instance, into the beef. Again, that's our market. We've not established that would be an economic benefit for us to do. Science is science, and you can read everything you want to, and depending on who writes it, you're going to get a different opinion. So at the end of the day, you have to trust somebody, and that's just our approach to it. The antibiotic question, we struggled for years with consumers' misunderstanding of how antibiotics are used in agriculture, and we, like many farmers of our size, struggled with this no antibiotic ever statement, and we decided that we would just attempt to educate our consumers that if we have an animal that gets ill, we treat the animal with antibiotics just like we would our children. Judicious use of antibiotics, in my mind, is very, very different from subtherapeutic use of antibiotics. We don't, regularly feed antibiotics to our animals because we, again, have not determined that there's an economic threshold that helps us, and it's not where our market is. So, again, these are complex issues. People have to read and talk, and the best way, again, you have to trust somebody at the end of the day, and oftentimes the best way to do that is to come to something like this or to connect with a farmer somewhere and ask those questions. And I agree with Tommy, there's good farmers and bad farmers on all different sides. And I've seen really happy, satisfied pigs in barns and in pastures, and I've seen poor pigs in barns and pastures. And it's not so much about that production system, it's about the management of the farmer, the work of the farmer, I think.
Tommy, you're from the larger scale farm. Do you use antibiotics? And
We operate in much the same way that Casey was talking about. If an animal is sick, yes, we don't want to see it suffer. We're going to treat it. But on wide scale, no, we do not go through and just wholesale go through and use antibiotics. It's only if an animal is sick. And then if we do treat an animal, it is recorded. She has an ear tag, a number. There's a card hanging above her. It is recorded, and we make sure that is followed through, and that animal would never leave the farm. And in our case, on our farm, it would be a sow that possibly then would leave the farm and go to be for market. That sow cannot leave the farm until the proper withdrawal time from that antibiotic would go through. And even on our cattle, some of our cattle are marketed as all natural, born, raised on the farm. And if one would become ill and we would treat it with an antibiotic, it would get a special ear tag that we could identify. And if those cattle were marketed as all natural, that calf would be pulled out and not go on that truckload.
And this is all very controlled as far as the use of antibiotics and all this. I mean, there are certain standards that you have to follow. You said days for it to come out of the system. It's not like you're just giving it to them and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, this is all.
Oh, it is. It is very controlled. Antibiotics are expensive, so we don't want to use them if we don't have to. And the only time is if there's a sick animal and we want to care for that animal and make it better. But there are withdrawal times, and we are strictly have to follow, and that's where those ear tag numbers, those cards hanging above them, where we track all of that. In fact, there's another card, a red card, that would go above a sow to tell you she has been treated, and there is no way she can be moved off of the farm until the withdrawal time to make sure that the food supply would remain safe. So it is very controlled.
And Dr. Tacker, speaking to this too, coming from NC State about the use of antibiotics and hormones, it is a very controlled thing, and it's all shown to be safe as far as the meat then later when it's being processed.
Yes. As a research microbiologist at NC State, my livelihood basically is how antibiotic use leads to resistance development and potential, trickling down into the environment. Yes, so all the antimicrobials as regulated by FDA have a withdrawal period. If the animal is supposed to go for processing plant X number of days, particular antibiotic has to be taken off. There has to be a lag period in between use and the animal landing in a slaughter plant. And that's tightly regulated. Again, a part of the judicious use of antimicrobials as mandated by the Food and Drug Administration. Now, there are checks and balances also. So, in case, let's say, a pig reaches a slaughter plant and there are USD officials out there, and they have quick tests to look for meat residues for these antimicrobials, and if they find a particular residue, they can cite that farm because we can track back where that particular pig came from. And if they are cited, then the shipment goes off for 1 month, and if they get a second citation, then they cannot ship their hogs for 1 year. So it is serious business, and the producers and the veterinarians, they take it very, very seriously. So at the end of the day, the product that you are eating, in my view, is very safe and wholesome.
So people shouldn't have any concerns, in your opinion, about the use of antibiotics or any of that?
Yes, I
hormones
mean,
or-
they are tightly regulated, judiciously used, and in my opinion, yes, I mean, they should not be concerned.
Do you think the public has a kind of a misperception about that, in your opinion?
Yes, I agree. You know, whenever I get that question, I always see that people take a very generalized outlook on, okay, we use antimicrobials that leads to resistance development. So let's take off these antimicrobials and the antimicrobial resistance problem is going to be solved. But I don't think that is the case. So research done in my lab, done in other people's lab, have seen that even if you take off the antibiotics, does not necessarily mean that pathogens are going to become antibiotic susceptible. So we have done all kinds of sampling, testing, microbiology, farm to the genome approach, and we have collected samples from commercial pigs, naturally grown pigs, and we see drug resistant and drug susceptible strains, bacterial strains in both the groups. So the question is, if an animal has not been exposed to antibiotics, how are they shedding these drug resistant strains? Well, one of the answers lies in the environment. You know, if you look at more than 50% of the antibiotics that we have right now, where are they coming from? They're coming from soil fungi, soil bacteria, who already have these mechanisms of resistance developed in them, and they pass it on to other bacterial pathogens. So the environmental reservoir of these drug resistant strains, which we usually tend to ignore, we always focus on the commodity, what's in the human, what's in the animal. We never hear about what's in the environment, which humans and animals share together.
Sure.
A lot of these pathogens are there already circulating in the environment with these resistance mechanisms. So that's something that I think we need to look at more carefully.